Hi and welcome to Mike's V8 Garage. This is the second part of my how to change your valve cover in 6 months for my, as it was then, new to me, Lexus GS430. So as I look back, for those that haven't seen the first part of this 3-part series, I'd noted a lot of smoke from my Lexus GS430 and I diagnosed that as valve cover gaskets and a bit of spark plug gasket failure. However, in the midst of doing that, I'd also noticed that the rot spread as far as the cam seals on the right hand bank at least, and also quite potentially the VVT seals as well. We pick up where I'm just about to start getting the engine a lot more stripped down than I planned, and I decided to do both sides because even though only one side was leaking, if one's leaking the other isn't too far behind, and while I was in there I might as well do both. So as you can hopefully see, the engine's at top dead centre, the tensioner's up there, a couple of 12mm bolts which I've taken precaution of loosening a bit. And that's one, and there we go. So with these tensioners, obviously these need to be wound back, and there's a little place for a pin there. That's that done. I remember I had a 20-ton press, and funny thing, that made light work of it. So the tensioner's been done. I'm now ready to get this out. And the first thing we're going to do then, before then, is get this cap off, which is not held on particularly tightly, thank goodness, which will allow me to take this cam cap off, which will then allow me to get the camshaft out. And there is a lot of oil behind there. Yeah. On VVTi seals, and seeing there's all that on the VVTi units, my bet now is VVT seals, although I suspect the cam seals will be gone as well. Okay, so this should now, there we go, lift off. Oh dear, yeah. So, as you can see, that cam seal there is not really providing much cam sealing, and you can see here the scissor gears. You can see there's two halves to that to the exhaust cam. If I hadn't put that bolt through it, which is holding nicely luckily, then as soon as I release this camshaft, that will go ping, and you've got to try and remember where everything was. And just as a preventative, I'm going to grab my paint pen now and just provide a reference mark just in case something happens and I need to put this back to where it was. Happy days. Right. Camshaft is now ready to come out, and the one thing is worth noting, although it probably can't be seen just now, let's get the torch on it, these cams have to be timed together for obvious reasons, because this one drives that one. It's maybe visible on the back there. There's a dot on either of the camshafts. That's how you get them back in time. And now I very, very carefully take the camshaft out. Right, so I've now got a camshaft with VVTi unit ready to be dismantled. Timings wise, there's a little notch there which engages with a little dowel on the top of the VVTi unit. These Torx bolts here are meant to be do not remove, hence they've been marked up pretty much every which way from Sunday, because they are going to be removed, because I think all the oil that was around the outside of that means that the internal O-ring there had gone. However, to get that off, I need to take this gear off as well. So I've got to get these off and get that off. Now again, there's a locating dowel there next to the double dot, which means it'll be very easy to relocate back on. So nice and simple, and I'm now going to crack on and get that done, get that cam seal off. We've got the gear off the back and the cam seal ready to come off, but to do that I need to then bring it forward, and to do that I need to remove the VVTi unit. So I've got the camshaft held in a vise, making careful I'm not on any of the lobes, and then with a nice demonstration of the timing, there we go. It's a 19mm cap on the front. I'm just checking those marks, and then there we go. As I said, I'm being very careful, because like I said, I know you can easily break the gears and you can easily break the camshafts doing this, and seeing as this is the first time I've done it, I am very much on measure twice, cut once. So that should now allow me to take the VVT unit off and get that oil out of there quickly. Put that to one side, and then careful. Anyway, now I'm able to get the cam seal off. Let's just have a quick look at that. So, meant to be nice and flexible inside. It doesn't appear too bad, but you saw how easily it was moving around on the cam, and also that side should be dry, whereas the whole thing is just swamping. So that can go in the bin, and the new ones, everything's all over the place. The new ones I've got here, and you can see there's a lot more flex there compared to, I'm going to push a fair bit more. But what I do want to do is get some assembly lube on this first before I put it on, so we'll do that later. Alright, now comes the point where if I do this right, I've saved myself about 400 or 500 quid for a new VVT unit, and if I get it wrong, then I suppose the worst case is I have to spend 400 quid on a new VVT unit, which it could be worse. Let's get these out. Right, I've just got the VVT unit apart, not through any effort of mine, but more because I was turning my back to look for a tool. Now the O-ring that I'm going to be replacing is in here, and I'll be honest, this one doesn't look, apart from the bits dropping off it, this one doesn't look too bad, but what there is lots of chunks of it flaking around inside. So I don't think it was particularly healthy. And basically there's two schools of thought on the potential replacement for this, because Lexus views that whole unit as non-serviceable. You can't get these O-rings from Lexus, and the general thinking on the internet is either it's a 2x77 or 2.5x77. So seeing as I've got this out in decent condition, I'm just going to do a quick back-to-back comparison and decide which one I want to put in. When you put the 2mm one next to it, obviously it's been compressed a bit. When you look at its side on, there is an overlap. Let's try the 2.5. Yeah, I think we're going with the 2.5. That just seems a lot better. And as you can see, that fits perfectly in there. There's a decent amount of protrusion. Let's just stick it back together quickly. There we go. And there's a fair bit of, you can probably see that there, there's a fair bit of proudness there that needs to be clamped down on, so yeah, I think we're going for the 2.5. About to rebuild the VVT unit, so what I've got is some Loctite 518, so it's a flange sealant just to line in here and provide a bit of extra sealing in addition to the O-ring, because I don't want this leaking afterwards. Right, and that's that basically ready to go on. So we've got a O-ring, we've got an additional flange sealant. Now I just need to get my thread lock and prepare these 4 bolts. And now it all goes back together. That is one hopefully correctly rebuilt, but you can see there the marks where they've survived. Only one of them has been a bit damaged, but all the marks are about as lined up as I can work them out. The new O-ring's in there, it's clamped down. I mean, like I said, these bolts didn't have much force on them, so I've clamped them down sort of tight, but we'll see. I'll check on the torque wrench later. But that seemed to go okay. Now I just need to get all this back together. Just giving the cam seals a little bit of a lube up before I put them on. And those just slide in place, and then I should be able, because of the locating dowel here, slide that down and engage it. There we go. Same. Move the gear back up. Got the gear on, just making sure it's seated nicely. Everything's been cleaned up. Just need to put the bolts back in with a bit of Loctite. Just drop in. Ready to continue reassembling. We've got the gear on. Next I've got the main bolt for the VVT, and again plenty of Loctite. And the end cap on the end, and again tight, but not that tight. And we have 1x camshaft ready to go back in the car. Okay, so about to put the camshaft in. Single dot. Probably can't see it in there, but single dot on there. And now it's just a case, he says optimistically, of lining them all up.
A few moments later.
Okay, we have got dot to dot meshed. The camshaft is laying flat. Cam seal is in place. It's all been nice and cleaned up. I think we're about ready to get it zipped up. So this is a quick update by head torch. Get the torch on there. Timing dot to timing dot. Not particularly visible, and therein lies a tail. But the camshafts are in. All the bolts have been torqued down. The cam caps are on. The pulley is on. It's set to time. All these bolts are torqued down. There's a new seal just there, or not a seal, a plug rather, which has got a sealant all around it. I'm about to put the valve cover back on, hence there is in the depths of the engine bay a further section of RTV on the back, just where there's caps on the rear, and again it's to aid with that sealing there. So now the next thing to do is try and get the cam cover on and get it zipped back in, and then that's one side done. And then I'm going to go and do the same to this. having had an absolute epic getting this camshaft in, because despite going over and over in my head the mantra single dot to single dot on the cam gears, basically I initially installed this camshaft back in, having stripped and redone it, double dot to single dot, 180 degrees out of phase. So yeah, I was not a particularly happy chappy when I found that one out, because I had to take the whole thing out and do it again properly. Then it's on to getting the cam belt back on. Being trusted, a new belt is going on tomorrow, and once all of that's back on, these are back in time, and I've turned the engine over a few times to make sure it's all right, and then hope like hell that when I turn the key this thing fires up, and what I don't hear is a horrible grinding noise because I've done something wrong with the camshafts. One thing I forgot to mention, cam covers have now been painted, and now to put it back on. That cam cover and pretty much all of it, the gubbins is back on, bar the stuff I've had to leave off before I get the spark plugs in, because I don't want to put them in until it's all set to time and everything's tightened. Same on this side, although it was an absolute pain. I've still got the battery, the ECU and all the rest of it out, again because otherwise I wouldn't be able to get in at the spark plug holes. Coming back now, the belt is now on. You can see the timing marks on this side, and the belt, conveniently being a proper Toyota one, comes properly marked up and with dots on the outside face of the belt for the crank positions, which is useful. So I've marked that up with a paint pen just to make it even more obvious. You can see it's nicely lined up there, dot to line to dot to line. Same thing on this side, line, line, dot, line. And then down where the crank is, it'll say crank. And interestingly, there's quite a few ways to make sure the crank is lined up correctly. There's a little dot there which marks with the keyway, and there's two dots on the outside of the belt which I've again highlighted with paint pen, and when that belt is lined up, they all line up. Obviously it's under tension now, so that can't happen. If we go underneath, you can see that there's a further, normally there's a little dot just there, which again I've filled in with paint pen. That lines up with a dot on the outside of the belt, and the crank line, which you can just see underneath it, which again I've highlighted. And on the belt there's a further two white dots there which go either side of that bolt hole, and then as I mentioned, the further two dots are further up. When the belt is slack, will line up with the little indent up on the top, so that way you can make absolutely sure everything's in time. The tensioner is now back in, but there's enough tension now on that belt. Like I said, in time, in time. White dot in the right place. I'm now going to give 2 complete revolutions. That's bang on time on the right cam, bang on the left, and we can see the keyway and the little dot on the crank. So I can now start rebuilding it. Okay, whoop, timing cover back on. Now it's just crank pulley, which again, because it's been all nice and greased up, goes on, slides onto the keyway, and we're good. The next thing you need to do is get some Loctite on that. There we go. And as you can see, I put a lot of thread lock on there because this coming out of my Jag was the reason the engine failed, thanks to somebody not putting any Loctite on the bolt. So I'm not going to make that mistake with this car, or rather I'm not going to make someone else's mistake myself. So that goes in. I'll get it roughly tightened now and then torque it later. All the pulleys are on, tightened, done up. The nicely fresh alternator is in, tightened, connected, and not covered in oil anymore. All of the LPG and other bits and pieces have been put in on this side, including the battery, which is now getting a little bit of juice because it was goosed. No deliberate rhyme there, but never mind. This side likewise, all done up, everything back in place. All the different LPG bits and pieces are shoehorned back in place again. Coolant lines back in place. So all that's been done and checked, although admittedly I am going to have to get new spring clips for a lot of things, because these just free turn. But that's only the PCV system, I'm not massively fussed about that just now. Next step's going to be to get the radiator back in, because I don't need the clearance just to get a torque wrench onto that crank pulley bolt. And then really, as soon as that crank pulley bolt's tightened up, I can get all the air intake stuff back on, which is about 5 minutes work. Top up the coolant, and then can start it up and start bleeding. You can hear the tick now. Can't hear anything this side. This side, definitely something going on.